Prime Minister Mark Carney met with the newly minted Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, Tony Wakeham, this morning.
A lot to talk about. Really exciting time for the province. A series of major projects from conventional to clean energy, and the Premier has an ambitious agenda. We're looking forward to working together on helping to realize that for the benefit of the people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, Premier Wakeham said he pushed for the federal government to recognize the Bay du Nord offshore oil project as a project of national interest. And for more on that meeting, well, the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, Tony Wakeham, joins me now here in the studio. Premier, it's good to see you in person. Thank you for coming.
Great to be here.
Did you get a yes from Mark Carney? Is Bay du Nord going on the list?
Well, you know, I had a great conversation with the Prime Minister. I talked to him about the meeting that I had with Equinor. And it wasn't that long ago when the news were carrying the idea that Equinor had no interest whatsoever in doing any topside work in Newfoundland and Labrador, as you know.
Right.
And coming out of the meeting with Equinor, I found that it was a real good meeting as well, and they came out and wrote us and talked about, you know, they're willing to issue an EOI now, an expression of interest, to have not only all the modular work but also the topside works done in Newfoundland and Labrador. Right. Now, recognizing that comes with things around, you know, being on budget and being on time. But the fact that they've done that and shown a willingness to do that, I think that's an important step.
Right.
And so the conversation today with the Prime Minister was about, okay, what's the role the federal government can play here? Because I believe the federal government has a role to play. We talked about the opportunity for an investment tax credit that was there before, what that might look like, and the idea about being a partner. Because it's about partnership with the federal government, partnership with the province, and partnership with Equinor. David, I really feel that Equinor wants to move forward with this project. And there's a willingness to do that, and we've got to work with them to see how we make that happen.
Well, look, the construction work you talked about, topsides and everything, I mean, that's an important part of these projects in terms of local benefits. That's well, it's required of any proponent
Right.
under the Atlantic Accord. We've seen that with all the other oil projects before. The investment tax credit, I can see why Equinor would want that. Who wouldn't want a tax credit if you're going to build something? But does Equinor want to be on the major projects list, or are they just looking for the tax credit so they can make their sanctioning decisions?
They were pleased. I think what it does by putting it on the nation building project list, it emphasizes that Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador are in the oil business. And I have spoken about that a lot. The idea that, you know, we all recognize there's a transition. And it's not about one or the other. It's not about being about the environment versus oil. It's
Right.
about how do you strike that balance. And I've always said if the world has a demand for oil, then Canada and Newfoundland and Labrador ought to be playing a part in that. The Prime Minister gets that. And certainly we see it as something that our province can clearly participate in, and we want to be part of that.
But did you get a commitment on the projects list, or did you get a commitment on the investment tax credit from the Prime Minister today or his staff?
Well, he's taken that away. Obviously, he didn't make any commitments today. But what I got a sense from him, though, was a sense of a commitment that he's definitely interested in promoting an oil policy idea, what we had talked about getting back in the oil business. That's the way I phrased it up the other day. And I believe that he's looking to do that as well. He's talked about that. You know, that's the first time we've had a federal government in a long time talk about being in the oil business. And so it's good to hear that, and I look forward to making things happen.
But something Mark Carney has also expressed interest in, certainly when the first tranche of the major projects were announced in September, is the Churchill Falls Agreement, the Gull Island project. That is part of this memorandum of understanding your predecessors, the Liberal government, signed with Premier Legault in Quebec. That was not mentioned in the most recent list of major projects, making me wonder if you've pulled your support for that idea, because I know you're doing an independent review. You plan to do an Who's going to do this independent review and when?
We have a number of discussions ongoing. I have been looking over a number of different resumes from different, what I think could be useful in doing this review. We're currently developing in terms of reference.
Like big energy companies, like energy analysts?
No, I think what I'm looking
at
is a three-person panel similar to what was there before in a different format. I think you clearly need someone with the economics background, the financial background, and the energy background. So those are the type of things we're looking at. But what's important for me here, and that came back to the discussion with the Prime Minister today, was to talk about what the opportunities are. When that MOU was signed back in December, We think about what's happened already since then in terms of changes, in terms of, the tariffs in the U.S.,
Sure.
the opportunities. The Prime Minister talked about, an energy corridor across Canada. And, and we talked about at that time, there was talk about, a pipeline going from west to east. And then we start thinking about, well, what else can we do in terms of, can we have a corridor for hydroelectricity to go from east to west? But one of the things I think that also was, for too long in our province of Newfoundland and Labrador, we thought of our resources as something to sell.
Sure.
And I want to look at them as something that we can use and develop.
Right, but that was the attempt with Muskrat Falls, which a Conservative government did, and that has become a boondoggle that has driven the financial situation. This is the other hydro project in Labrador. So, I understand the caution about doing yet another one, but this three-person panel you're talking about, are you talking about people from home, or because there are big global firms that study these things and can give you an assessment there?
At global firms or anything like that. I think my commitment is to try and get this done as quickly as we can with the terms of reference that are as appropriate to look at. And it's about, how do I make sure that we're not simply repeating history? Wayne Gretzky had a line that he said, I will skate to where the puck is going,
right,
not where it has been. And I look at this as a project, do I want to sign up for another 50 years? What have we actually looked at? What have we explored? What were the other options we considered, if any? And when I think about those things, and you and I can talk about all this, about with data centers, and think about what we have in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I think it's important for us to make sure I get this right.
Yeah, no, look, I understand that, and as someone who grew up in the place and loves the place, you want the best for the place. But Premier Legault is facing a tough election next year, and you may have a separatist government that's promising a referendum in Quebec within the next 18 months, and they have already called what is on the table an insult to Quebec. They feel they are entitled, really, and own the land of Labrador, so you're unlikely to find a partner there, sir. And the Prime Minister, when he talks about critical minerals, the Labrador potential and data centers, these kind of clean hydro projects, they can give you carbon neutral developments in Labrador.
My agenda is not to be worried about Quebec. Quebec has the power. Quebec needs the power. We have the power. But what I'm focused on is, what does it mean for Newfoundland and Labrador? Because I have said many times that this cannot simply be about what we're going to do for the next 4 years or 5 years or 6 years.
Yeah.
I want to be in a position that, 30 years from now, I'm long gone, maybe you're not, but
I won't be far behind if I'm not.
I want to make sure that the legacy that we leave, when you think about it, is that we're not repeating history. I believe that this project, as you have described, is an opportunity for us to look at a way of getting out from under this cycle of deficit that we've talked about.
I get it.
And how do we make sure that happens? So this is what's important. Do I believe that we can do a deal with Quebec? Absolutely, I do. As I've said, we'll do a deal with anybody, anywhere. But we cannot be held to a timeline. If this power is needed across Canada, and we can develop our own industry and our own resources, then we ought to be looking at it.
Okay, but are you looking for a better deal with Quebec in this review, or a deal that wouldn't include Quebec? Because, as you know, the geography is what the geography is. For the original Upper Churchill hydro project, the power lines go through there to get to the markets. And they do have ownership and successor rights, even when the power contract expires. Since this is a deep dive into Newfoundland and Labrador history for people at home. But, they are a shareholder in the Churchill Falls project and CFLco, which owns it, and have some successor rights in 2041, right?
That is the Upper Churchill contract.
Right.
But not the Gull Island project.
No, I understand, but they're kind of linked right now with what's on the table.
But we can also make sure, we're not opposed to doing a deal with Quebec, but what we want to make sure of is, as I go back to what I said earlier, are we going to make sure, we've seen a lot of industry has been created in Quebec as a result of the power that they've been able to buy at really low prices from Newfoundland and Labrador.
Of course.
They have benefited significantly, and industries have been created. What's the opportunity for us to develop industries in Labrador? That's something we ought to be looking at. And again, it doesn't mean that we're not going to deal with Quebec.
The mine expansions in Lab West would like the power, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's something that can be done. Absolutely, that can happen. But that's where I think we ought to be looking at it.
Okay, so help me just as a final point, Premier, just on the timelines here. You're looking at the idea of a three-person review panel. When will that be appointed? what is the horizon for the review to be done? Because you've also promised to put this to a referendum. And I assume that is still your plan, that this goes to a referendum of the people back home. It's like, what's the timeline for
The
these
first
things?
thing we have to do is, and we will get the terms of reference done, get the panel announced, and let them do the work. And I have said that they will have access to all the information they need. They will have the resources they need to be able to do this work. And so, and what I intend to do is make the recommendations that they come forward public so people can understand exactly what was done. And then we go from there and see what that looks like.
First quarter of next year?
I would hope that it can be done, absolutely. Within, we're looking at a 90-day window, 3-month window.
Okay. And what about the referendum, Premier?
And then that will depend upon what the report shows us and what the review tells us. I think
Well,
that's the next
whether
step.
you have one or what the timing of it would be?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think it depends on what the referendum says, how quickly we can go. Depending on what that review tells us, it will determine how quickly we can move forward.
Okay, but I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding you, because it was like the day the election started back in September. You said you're going to put it to a referendum.
We intend
you
to
are
do that.
going to do that?
We
Okay.
intend to do that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, Premier Tony Wakeham, you got a lot on your plate. Thanks for taking some time to come in today. Appreciate it,
It's
sir.
a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir.